Let me tell you a story that happened not long ago, in a kingdom where money could hide almost anything. There lived a billionaire whose wealth stretched across the land like rivers of gold. His mansion stood tall on a hill, guarded by high walls and loyal men. Inside those walls, secrets grew like weeds in darkness. On this particular night, thunder rolled across the sky and rain fell like tears from heaven. The billionaire's infant son had vanished from his crib. Guards ran through hallways shouting orders. Servants searched every room with trembling hands. The billionaire's fiancée stood in the nursery, her beautiful face twisted with rage. She pointed a sharp finger at the young maid who cared for the child. "You left him alone," she screamed. "You let him disappear." The maid fell to her knees, crying that she had never left the baby's side. But no one believed her. Near the forest edge, a guard found something that made everyone's blood run cold. A muddy baby blanket caught on thorns, soaked with rain and earth. While chaos filled the mansion, the fiancée slipped away to her private bathroom. Her hands shook as she scrubbed mud from beneath her fingernails. Brown water swirled down the drain like guilty secrets trying to escape. She stared at her reflection in the golden mirror and whispered words that would haunt her forever. "No child will stand between me and this empire." Her eyes burned with a fire that had nothing to do with love. Outside her door, she could hear the billionaire shouting questions and the maid sobbing denials. The fiancée smiled a cold smile. Everything was going according to her plan. She changed her dress quickly, hiding the muddy one deep in her closet. But she did not notice the house guard who passed her doorway at just the wrong moment. He saw the soil stains on her expensive fabric. Their eyes met for one terrible second. Fear flashed across her face, then transformed into something dangerous. "If you speak one word," she hissed at him, "your family will suffer." The guard lowered his eyes and walked away in silence. The young maid knelt beside the muddy blanket, holding it against her chest as if it could bring the baby back. Tears rolled down her cheeks and mixed with the rain still falling from the dark sky. "I never left him," she whispered to anyone who would listen. "I would never hurt that innocent child." But the other servants looked away, afraid to defend her against the fiancé's accusations. Then something strange happened. The maid felt a pulling sensation in her chest, like an invisible rope tugging her toward the dark forest. It was gentle but impossible to ignore. She had felt this before, in dreams that came to her night after night. In those dreams, an old village elder with kind eyes called her name and pointed toward the earth. She never understood what the dreams meant until this moment. The wind shifted direction, carrying a sound so faint that only her ears caught it. A baby's cry, weak and far away, coming from somewhere beyond the trees. She looked around wildly, but no one else seemed to hear anything at all. The billionaire's car roared up the driveway like an angry beast. He burst through the mansion doors, his face dark with fury and drowning in grief. His only son, his precious child, was gone. Someone had to pay for this terrible loss. The fiancée rushed to him with tears streaming down her face. Tears that looked real but came from a heart made of stone. "It was the maid," she sobbed against his chest. "She was the last one with him. She must have been careless, distracted. Who knows what she allowed to happen?" The billionaire's jaw tightened. He had always trusted the young maid with his son. She had been gentle and devoted. But his fiancée's words planted seeds of doubt that grew quickly in the soil of his panic. He called for the maid to be brought before him. She stood small and trembling, her eyes red from crying. "How could you let this happen?" he roared at her. The maid tried to explain, tried to describe the strange pulling feeling and the cry only she could hear. But her words sounded like madness. Suddenly, her eyes rolled back and she collapsed to the marble floor, her body shaking with a vision of a child buried beneath dark earth. The maid woke in her small servant's room, her body drenched in cold sweat. The vision still burned behind her eyes like fire that would not go out. She had seen the baby lying in darkness, covered by soil but somehow still breathing. And she had seen the old elder from her dreams standing over the grave, his lips moving with words she could not hear. Now, awake in the quiet darkness, She heard those words clearly for the first time. Follow the earth. The spirit voice whispered like wind through leaves. The truth hides beneath it. Only you can bring it to light. The maid's grandmother had told her stories when she was young. Stories about ancestors who watched over innocent children and guided the pure of heart. She had thought they were just tales to help her sleep. Now she understood they were truth wrapped in the clothing of legend. Her hands stopped shaking. Her tears dried. Something greater than fear filled her chest. It was purpose. She rose from her bed, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, and stole a lantern from the kitchen. The storm still raged outside, but she walked into it alone, following the pull that would not let her rest. The maid's lantern light danced across the muddy ground as she walked into the forest. Rain soaked through her clothes and made the earth slippery beneath her feet. She did not know exactly where to go, only that something invisible was leading her forward step by step. The trees seemed to lean toward her, their branches pointing like ancient fingers. Then she saw it. A small footprint pressed into the mud, half filled with rainwater. Her heart pounded. She knelt down and held her lantern close to examine it carefully. This was not a child's footprint. It was too large, shaped by an adult's shoe. A woman's shoe. The print was fresh despite the rain, leading toward a slight hill covered in disturbed soil. Something about that mound looked wrong, like the earth had been moved recently and hastily. The maid's breath came fast and shallow. She took another step forward, and that was when she heard it clearly. Not in her mind this time, but in her ears. A weak, muffled cry coming from beneath the ground. Her blood turned to ice and fire at the same time. No, she breathed. Please, no. She fell to her knees and began to dig with her bare hands. The maid's fingers clawed through mud and roots, dirt packing beneath her nails until they bled. The crying grew louder, more desperate. Hold on, little one, she gasped. I am coming. I am here. Her hands hit something soft. Fabric. She dug faster, her heart hammering against her ribs like it wanted to break free. Then she saw him. The infant's face, pale as moonlight, his eyes closed and his tiny chest barely moving. She pulled him from the earth and held him against her body, wrapping him in her shawl. The baby coughed weakly and drew in a long, shuddering breath. Live, she whispered. Please live. At that exact moment, something impossible happened. Though the storm still raged above, a warm wind blew through the trees around them. It smelled like flowers and sunshine, like her grandmother's cooking and safety and love. The baby's eyes opened slightly, his little hand wrapped around her finger. Tears of gratitude poured down the maid's face as she turned to carry him back. But she did not see the shadow watching from behind a tree, the figure whose face went white with shock and fury at the sight of the child alive. The fiancé stood at her bedroom window, looking out at the storm. She was rehearsing what she would say tomorrow when the billionaire's son was declared dead. How she would comfort him. How she would make sure their wedding happened quickly so no one could question her place in this house. Then movement at the forest edge caught her eye. Her heart stopped. The maid was walking toward the mansion, her clothes muddy and torn, carrying something wrapped in cloth. No, could not be. The fiancé pressed her face against the glass, her perfect makeup smearing with sweat. The maid climbed the steps to the side door, and for one terrible second, the cloth fell away just enough. The baby, alive, breathing, staring up at the maid with trust in his eyes. Pure rage boiled up inside the fiancé's chest. All her planning, all her careful work, undone by this worthless servant. How had the child survived? How had she found him? This was impossible. This was disaster. She backed away from the window, her mind spinning with panic. The guard she had threatened earlier walked past her doorway. She grabbed his arm hard enough to leave marks. The maid cannot reach morning alive, she hissed. Finish this tonight. I do not care how. The guard walked down the hallway with his hands clenched into fists. The fiancé's words echoed in his head like poison. He was supposed to hurt the maid, maybe even kill her. But something inside him rebelled against the order. He had seen the fiancée that night, muddy and wild-eyed. He had watched her bury something near the forest. At the time, he told himself it was none of his business. Now the truth was clear as daylight. The fiancé had tried to murder an innocent child, and now she wanted to murder an innocent girl. The guard had grown up in a village where people still believed in the old ways. His grandmother taught him to fear the ancestors' judgment more than any human's anger. If he harmed someone pure of heart to protect someone wicked, the spirits would curse his bloodline for generations. He found the maid in the nursery, rocking the baby gently and singing a soft song. She looked up at him with exhausted eyes. The guard glanced around to make sure no one else was near. He leaned close and whispered quickly, "Someone wants you dead. Watch your back. Lock your door." Then he walked away before she could ask questions. His conscience still heavy but slightly lighter than before. The billionaire collapsed into a chair when he saw his son alive. His strong body shook with sobs of relief that he could not control. He took the baby from the maid's arms and held him close, checking every finger and toe to make sure he was real. "How?" he gasped. "How is this possible?" The maid told her story again. The dreams, the pulling feeling, the voice telling her to follow the earth. She described digging with her bare hands and pulling the child from a grave that should have killed him. The billionaire's face shifted between joy and confusion. His logical mind could not accept that his son had been buried alive. Who would do such a thing? And how could a baby survive beneath the soil? He looked at his fiancée, who stood in the doorway with a smile frozen on her face. "Did you know about this?" he asked her. "Did you know where he was?" She shook her head quickly, her hands clasped in front of her. "Of course not, my love. I am just grateful he is safe." But something was wrong. The baby, who usually reached for anyone with a smile, suddenly stiffened in his father's arms. His tiny eyes locked on the fiancée, and his face crumpled with fear. He began to cry and claw at his father's sleeve, trying to turn away from her. By morning, whispers spread through the mansion like wildfire jumping from tree to tree. The servants gathered in the kitchen during their brief break, speaking in low voices. The cook said she had seen the fiancée pacing the halls late at night, muttering to herself. The gardener mentioned finding a shovel hidden behind the storage shed, its blade still caked with fresh earth. The housekeeper remembered how the fiancé had always looked at the baby with cold eyes, never with love. "I thought it was strange," the housekeeper said quietly. "She never wanted to hold him, never sang to him. What kind of future mother behaves that way?" Another servant spoke up, shame in her voice. "Once I saw her pinch the child when she thought no one was watching. He cried, and she just smiled." The maid listened to all of this, her heart sinking lower with each new piece of evidence. She was not the only one who had seen the darkness beneath the fiancé's beautiful face. But she was the only one brave enough or foolish enough to speak the truth out loud. Unfortunately, the fiancé heard every word through the door she had cracked open. Her face went pale, then red, then pale again. These servants would ruin everything. They had to be silenced, every single one of them. The next afternoon, the maid walked down the main hallway carrying fresh linens for the nursery. Above her head, the great crystal chandelier sparkled with 1,000 pieces of light. She had walked beneath it 100 times before without thinking. This time was different. A strange creaking sound made her look up just as the chandelier began to fall. Time seemed to slow down. She dove forward, rolling across the floor as the massive light fixture crashed behind her. Glass exploded like stars across the marble. The metal frame bent and twisted where she had been standing just 1 second before. Other servants came running, screaming. The billionaire rushed in from his office. Everyone crowded around the maid, asking if she was hurt. She sat up slowly, her hands and knees cut by tiny shards of glass, but otherwise alive. "The chain must have been old," someone said. "It finally broke." But the maid looked up at the ceiling where the chandelier had hung. The chain was not broken. It had been cut cleanly with some kind of blade, and caught on the twisted metal frame was a small piece of expensive fabric, deep purple silk with gold thread. The exact fabric of the dress the fiancé had worn that morning. That night, the maid could not sleep. Fear and determination battled inside her chest. She waited until the mansion fell quiet, then slipped out through the servants' entrance. The village where she had grown up was an hour's walk through the forest. She found the elder's house by the light of his lantern burning in the window. He was expecting her. "Come, child," he said before she could knock. "I have been waiting for you to find your courage." Inside his small home, surrounded by herbs and carved wooden figures, the elder listened to her story. His old face grew grave. When she finished speaking, he stood and walked to a shelf where he kept sacred objects. "There is a prophecy," he said slowly. "Truth buried with wicked hands shall rise through the humble. That is you, child. You are the humble heart chosen to bring darkness into light." He pressed a small charm into her palm, a circle of woven grass with a white stone at its center. "This will protect you from evil meant to harm the innocent. But understand this clearly, the storm has only begun. The wicked one will strike again and again until truth pulls her down." The maid closed her fingers around the charm, feeling warmth spread through her hand. She thanked the elder and walked back through the darkness, no longer afraid. In the city, far from the peaceful village, the fiancé sat across from a man in an expensive suit. They met in a private room where no one could hear their conversation. The man was a lawyer, but not the honest kind. He dealt in forged documents and legal lies. "Show me the papers," the fiancé demanded. The lawyer slid a folder across the table. Inside were marriage documents that had been changed, edited, rewritten. According to these false papers, once the fiancée became the billionaire's wife, she would gain immediate control of his entire estate. If anything happened to him, everything would become hers. The businesses, the properties, the bank accounts, everything. "These will hold up in court?" she asked. The lawyer nodded, but his smile was not friendly. "They will. But my services do not come cheap. You still owe me a great deal of money." The fiancé's jaw tightened. "You will get your payment after the wedding." "That was not our agreement," the lawyer said coldly. "If you cannot pay me soon, I will tell your billionaire everything." I wonder how he would feel knowing his beloved fiancé planned to rob him blind. The fiancé's hands shook with rage, but she forced a smile. "You will have your money. Just give me time." The guard could not carry his secret any longer. It burned inside him like hot coals he had swallowed. He had warned the maid, but that was not enough. Real justice required real evidence. While the fiancé was away at her meeting in the city, the guard used his master key to enter her private rooms. His heart pounded as he searched through her closet, her drawers, her personal belongings. What he found made his blood run cold. Hidden beneath expensive dresses was a muddy garment she had tried to hide. In a locked drawer he found letters that revealed a terrible past. Years ago, the fiancé had destroyed another wealthy man through lies and manipulation. She had taken his money and left him with nothing. There were more letters showing she had done this before to others, each time moving to a new place when people got suspicious. She was not just ambitious. She was a predator who hunted wealthy men and destroyed anyone who stood in her way. The guard carefully folded one letter and slipped it into his pocket. He found the maid in the garden and pressed the paper into her hand. "Read this," he whispered. "It proves what kind of monster she really is." Then he disappeared before anyone could see them together. The billionaire sat in his study late into the night, unable to rest. His son was alive, which should have brought him peace. Instead, questions plagued him like mosquitoes he could not swat away. He kept replaying the events in his mind, looking for answers that made sense. Why had his fiancée's dress been muddy that night when she claimed to have been inside the whole time? Why had she insisted so strongly that they should not call the police when his son first disappeared? Why did she seem more angry than relieved when the baby was found alive? The billionaire was not a foolish man. He had built his fortune by paying attention to details others missed. Now those details were forming a picture he did not want to see. He opened his laptop and began searching for information about his fiancée's past. She had told him she came from a good family that had fallen on hard times. But when he looked for records, he found nothing. No family. No history. Just a woman who appeared 5 years ago with a new name and a beautiful smile. His chest felt tight. He picked up his phone and called his head of security. "I need you to investigate someone," he said quietly. "I need to know everything. And I need you to start right now, tonight." The fiancée knew her time was running out. She could feel the walls closing in, feel the eyes watching her with growing suspicion. The maid had to die. There was no other choice. She crushed sleeping pills into powder and mixed them into a cup of tea. She carried it to the maid's room herself, smiling sweetly. "I owe you an apology," the fiancé said, her voice dripping with false kindness. "I accused you wrongly. Please, accept this tea as a peace offering." The maid looked at the cup, then at the charm hanging around her neck that the elder had given her. Something inside her screamed danger. "Thank you," she said slowly, taking the cup. "Let me set it down to cool." The moment her fingers wrapped around the hot ceramic, the charm against her chest grew burning hot. The white stone at its center turned black as coal. The cup slipped from her hands and shattered on the floor. The fiancé's smile vanished. "How clumsy," she hissed. But the maid saw the truth in her eyes. The truth of murder stopped only by something the fiancé could not see or understand. The maid's voice came out steady and strong. "I know what you are, and soon everyone else will too." The next morning, the billionaire walked the grounds of his estate, needing fresh air to clear his troubled mind. The storm from days before had washed everything clean, but it had also revealed things meant to stay hidden. Behind the storage building, half buried in mud, he saw the edge of something metal. He knelt down and pulled it free. A shovel. Its blade was still caked with soil that had not fully dried. Something about it made his stomach twist. He called for his head of security, who arrived within minutes. "Test the soil on this shovel," the billionaire ordered. "I want to know where it came from." An hour later, the results came back. The soil matched perfectly with samples taken from the place where his son had been found buried. The billionaire's hands shook as he held the report. Someone in his house had used this shovel to dig his son's grave. Someone had tried to murder his child and make it look like an accident or the maid's carelessness. He thought of the guard who had been acting strangely. He called the man to his study and closed the door. "Tell me the truth," he said, his voice like iron. "Tell me everything you know, or I will have you arrested right now." The guard took a deep breath, and the truth finally poured out like water breaking through a dam. The billionaire stood alone in his study, the guard's confession echoing in his ears like thunder that would not stop. His fiancée, the woman he had planned to marry, the woman he had trusted, had tried to kill his son. His hands clenched into fists. His vision blurred with rage so powerful it frightened him. He had to confront her, but he had to do it carefully. If she knew she was caught, she might run. He found her in the sitting room, pretending to read a magazine. "We need to talk," he said, his voice cold as winter ice. "Alone." She followed him to his study, her eyes darting nervously. The moment the door closed, he showed her the shovel, showed her the soil report, showed her the guard's written statement. "Explain this," he demanded. Her face went through rapid changes: shock, fear, anger, calculation. "That guard is lying," she said quickly. "He hates me. He has always hated me." "Then explain the soil. Explain why your dress was muddy that night. Explain why you tried to keep me from calling the police." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. Finally, her mask cracked completely. "That child was cursed," she screamed. "He had to be removed. Everything would have been perfect without him. The fortune would have been mine. Ours. He ruined everything." The maid had been listening outside the door. Now she pushed it open and stepped inside, her heart racing but her voice steady. "It was not the child who was cursed," she said quietly. "It was you, cursed by your own greed and evil." The fiancée spun around, her face twisted with hatred. "You, this is all your fault. If you had just died like you were supposed to." "Tell him about the elder's prophecy," the maid interrupted. "Tell him about the vision I had. the ancestors who guided me to save his son. Truth buried with wicked hands rises through the humble. I am the humble. You are the wicked. The billionaire looked between the two women, trying to understand. The maid took a deep breath and told him everything. The dreams, the spiritual voice, the warm wind that blew in the storm, the elder's charm that saved her from poison. She handed him the letter the guard had given her. Read this. It shows who she really is, what she has done to other men, other families. The billionaire read, his face growing darker with each line. When he finished, he looked at his fiancée with disgust. You never loved me. Love? She laughed bitterly. Love is for poor people. I wanted your empire. And you will get nothing, he said coldly. Within hours, the study was full of people. The security team, the house staff, the village elders who had heard rumors and come to see justice done. Even the corrupt lawyer arrived, dragged there by the billionaire's investigators. One by one, the pieces of truth were laid out like cards in a deadly game. The guard testified about what he had seen, the muddy dress, the threats, the burial. The servants shared their observations, the hatred for the child, the late-night wanderings, the cruelty they had been too afraid to report. The lawyer offered immunity in exchange for cooperation, pulled out the forged marriage documents. She paid me to create these, he admitted. Once you married her, she would have controlled everything. If you died, she would have inherited it all. The fiancée stood in the center of the room, her beautiful face ugly with rage and fear. You cannot prove anything, she spat. It is all just words and suspicions. No, the billionaire said. It is truth, and truth is stronger than your lies. The fiancée realized in that moment that she had lost. Her careful plans had unraveled completely. She turned and ran for the door, pushing past the elders, desperate to escape. But the billionaire's security blocked her path. She spun around wildly, then ran toward the only exit left, the forest, the cursed place where she had buried the innocent child. Torches lit up the night as the search party moved through the forest. The billionaire led them, his jaw set with determination. The fiancée had run into the darkness, and they would find her. They would bring her to justice. The maid walked beside him, guided by that same pulling sensation that had led her to save the child. This way, she said softly. The trees seemed to bend and point, showing them the path. After an hour of searching, they found her. She was standing in the exact spot where she had buried the baby, her expensive shoes sinking into the soft earth. Her eyes were wide and wild, staring at something the others could not see. Do you see them? She whispered. The spirits. They are rising from the ground. They are coming for me. The billionaire looked around. He saw only trees and darkness. But the maid saw something more. A shimmer in the air. A presence that felt ancient and powerful. The ancestors were here, drawn by the evil that had been committed in this place. The fiancée fell to her knees, screaming, "Make them stop! Tell them to leave me alone!" She pressed her hands over her ears, but the whispers of judgment could not be blocked. Her perfect mask had finally shattered completely, revealing the terrified, guilty soul beneath. In her terror, the fiancée's last defenses crumbled like a wall made of sand. Words poured from her mouth, confessions she had never meant to speak. "I never loved him," she screamed at the billionaire. "I never wanted his child. I wanted his money, his power, his name." Tears and mud streaked her face. But it was more than greed. It was revenge. The crowd leaned in, shocked by this new revelation. Years ago, the child's mother destroyed my family. She worked for my father's company and exposed his illegal deals. He went to prison. My family lost everything. We had to sell our home, our business, everything. My mother died in poverty because of what she did. The billionaire's face went pale. My late wife? She was just doing her job. She was an accountant. She had to report what she found. "I do not care," the fiancé shrieked. "She ruined us. So when I discovered who you were, who your wife had been, I saw my chance. I would take everything from her, through you, through her child. I would make her family suffer like mine suffered. A spiritual wind rose, though the night had been still. The trees shook. The air turned cold. But she is dead, the fiancé sobbed. And still the ancestors protect her son. Still they punish me. The village elders stepped forward, their ancient eyes seeing more than normal men could see. The eldest raised his staff, and the whispers in the forest grew louder. The ancestors speak, he announced, his voice carrying through the trees like thunder. They show us this woman's heart, black with greed, red with revenge, empty of love. The air shimmered more strongly now. Even those who did not believe in the old ways felt something pressing down on the clearing. The ground beneath the fiancé's knees began to tremble slightly. Small cracks appeared in the earth around her, like the soil itself was rejecting her presence. What you buried shall bury your greed, the elder declared. This is the judgment of those who came before. You tried to destroy innocence, so innocence will destroy your plans. You tried to bury truth, so truth has risen to bury you. The fiancé curled into a ball, sobbing uncontrollably. The billionaire's security moved forward to take her into custody. She did not resist. All the fight had drained out of her like water from a broken vessel. As they led her away, the earth stopped trembling. The whispers faded. The forest became peaceful again. The maid touched the charm around her neck and found it warm and white once more. The ancestors had spoken their judgment, and it was finished. Repay you, but I will try every day for the rest of my life. The maid helped him stand, embarrassed by the attention. I only did what the ancestors guided me to do. The old elder who had given her the charm stepped forward, smiling. There is something you should know, he said to the billionaire. This young woman is not a stranger to your family. She is descended from the same ancestral line as your late wife. Your mother and her grandmother were cousins. The ancestors chose her specifically to protect your son because she carries the same blood, the same pure heart. The billionaire stared at the maid with new understanding. The prophecy had been fulfilled exactly as the spirits intended. The humble had risen. The wicked had fallen. Truth had conquered lies. The maid was given a place of honor in the household. The fiancé faced justice in the courts. The child grew strong and healthy, and the story spread across the kingdom, teaching a lesson the elders had always known. Greed buries itself, truth rises through the humble, and real wealth is found in character, not gold. The ancestors smiled, and peace returned to the land.